Let's go one step further and look at equivalence units and look at the entire process for this. This is 7. I'll do 7 and kind of walk you through it. And that way you should be able to come down and do 8 because it's very similar. But I think this can be a very complex and maybe confusing process. So let's kind of stroll through 7 together. Okay, so if you read the scenario they give you, you end up having, let me back up one. This is a 3-step process. First of all, you're going to find equivalent units, which means how much I have transferred out and how much is left in finished goods. And I'm going to try to come up with units, not cost. I'm looking at units now. Once we get the units, then we're going to look at costs, and we're going to look at being able to find the cost per equivalent unit for direct materials and conversion costs. Now, once you get that done, then we can assign cost and come up with the amount of money, costs that have been transferred into finished goods, and the amount of cost for those units that will stay in work in process. So it's a 3-step process, and the first step is going to deal with units. So it tells us in the problem that we had no beginning work in process, so 0. We started into production 7,800 units. So the amount of units we have to account for are 7,800 units. So if you look, it says we transferred out 6,400 units, and we have 1,400 units left in work in process. Now, obviously, if we transferred these out, all of the units were complete. So I transferred out for direct materials 6,400, and I transferred out for conversion costs 6,400. But when we get to work in process, we find out that obviously we had to transfer all of the, we had to incur all of the direct material costs because there was only one ingredient and everything is already in this mix. But we haven't finished converting it with the direct labor. And it tells us it's 80% complete. So to come up with an equivalent unit, we multiply that 80% times the 1,400 whole units, or the 1,400 units that are in process, and come up with 1,120. So when we add these together now, I have direct materials equivalent units of 7,800. I started 7,800 parts. I have all my direct materials in it, so I have 7,800 equivalent units. On the conversion costs, though, it's a little bit different because they're not totally complete. We have 6,400 that was transferred out, but this work in process is only 80%. So those equivalent units, as we call them, are 1,120. So now I'm adding them up. I've got my equivalent units for conversion costs and for direct materials. I take those two numbers and I come down and I do the cost per equivalent unit. I started with nothing on both sides. I added cost during March of 93.60, and this is a given, and 82.72. If you look at the problem and you add direct labor and manufacturing overhead, you come up with 82.72. Those are the costs that I have to allocate per unit. So now I pull down those 7,800 for direct materials, those 75.20 for conversion costs, and come up with $1.20 for direct material cost per unit, and conversion cost gives me 110. Now we do our next thing. We're going to assign costs so I can know how much I transferred out. So this tells me I transferred 6,400 out at a cost of 120 and 110. If I add those together, I come up with this amount was transferred to finished goods. Now in direct materials, I'm going to break it down. or on ending inventory, or ending work in process, I have to break that down. I have 1,400 that are at $1.20 for direct materials, so that comes to $16.80. But for the conversion cost, I don't have that full 1,400. I have the equivalent unit from up here of 1120. So I'm going to multiply that out, and I come up with 1232. So add those two together, and you end up with 2912 in work in process and 1477.20 in being transferred out to your finished goods, which makes it very nice that we've accounted for $17,632 in cost, which is what the total cost were for March. So remember, a three-step process. You got to figure out your equivalent units, you figure out your cost per equivalent unit, and then you multiply it out to assign costs based on the two calculations you have done. So you're going to use the equivalent units here and the cost per equivalent unit to literally separate out that cost and come back with the total amount of cost that you used during the that week or that period of time. So give that a whirl, see if that helps. All right. Thank you.